The TV was on, but the sound was off. That's the first thing the neighbor noticed the next morning. She stood there on the sidewalk, coffee in hand, staring at the house. The blinds were still closed. That was strange. Nancy was always up before dawn, always had that porch light burning. But that Saturday, everything was dark. The house just sat there, quiet, tucked back in the foothills. It didn't look like a crime scene. It just looked empty, but inside, something was terribly wrong. The bed was unmade. A cup of tea sat cold on the nightstand, and the doorbell camera, the one that was always recording, always watching, had been knocked offline at exactly 1:47 in the morning. By 2:12 a.m., the motion sensors caught a figure, a man moving in the dark. And by 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker app disconnected from her phone. That's the thing about technology. It keeps secrets, but it also tells time. And that timeline is the only reason anyone knows she didn't just leave. She was taken, but here's the part that makes this story different from every other missing person case you've heard. It's not just what happened inside that house. It's what the man in charge of finding her said weeks later. A warning that sent chills through the entire community. A warning that made people lock their doors a little tighter. He said the person who did this might not be done. He said the suspect could absolutely strike again, and that changes everything, The man who said that is Sheriff Chris Nanos. He's a straight talker. Doesn't do a lot of press conferences with polished statements. He looks tired most of the time because he is. This case has consumed him. For weeks, his team has been chasing shadows. They've questioned dozens of people. They've followed tips that led nowhere. They've watched that doorbell footage so many times they can see it in their sleep. The footage is haunting. A figure dressed in dark clothing walks up to the front door. He's wearing a backpack, a specific black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack. The FBI later confirmed that. They also confirmed his height, about 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10. Average build. A man so ordinary he could be anyone. He reaches up and does something to the camera. The feed goes dark. That's the last image of Nancy's home before she vanished. Inside, investigators found something else. DNA, not Nancy's. Not family members. Mixed DNA, they called it. They won't say whose. They won't say if it matches anyone in the system. But they have it. And they're holding on to it like a secret weapon. Sheriff Nanos sat down with NBC News more than a month after Nancy disappeared. The reporter asked him the question everyone wants answered. Do you think this was random? Do you think anyone else is in danger? He didn't hesitate. He said, "Criminal minds are criminal minds." That phrase hung in the air. It's not a soundbite. It's a warning. He was saying that whatever lives inside the person who took an 84-year-old grandmother from her bed in the middle of the night, that thing doesn't just turn off. It doesn't go away because the job is done. He said they believe they know why it happened. They have a theory, a strong one. They think Nancy was targeted. But here's the part that should make your skin crawl. They're not 100% sure. Think about that. The sheriff of Pima County, the man with the most information, the man who has seen the evidence, read the reports, watch the footage, he cannot say with certainty that Nancy Guthrie was the only name on that list. He told the reporter, "It'd be silly to tell people, don't worry about it. You're not his target. You could be." That's not a politician talking. That's a man who has seen something in the evidence that he can't unsee. Something that tells him this might not be over. Now, let's sit with that for a minute. Because the natural reaction is to ask, if they think she was targeted, why warn the public? If this was personal, if it was about Nancy specifically, then everyone else should be safe, right? That's what you'd think. That's what you'd want to believe. But Sheriff Nanos threw cold water on that comfort. He basically said, "We have an idea. We have a theory, but we're not placing bets on it. And until we know for sure, you need to act like you're in the crosshairs." The community where Nancy lived is quiet, affluent, the kind of place where people feel safe. They leave their cars in the driveway. They walk their dogs at night. It's the foothills of Tucson, desert beauty, mountain views. It's not supposed to happen here, but it did, and now the sheriff is telling them. Don't think for a minute that because it happened to the Guthrie family, you're safe. That's a heavy thing to hear when you're lying in bed at night and you hear a creak in the hallway. That's a heavy thing to hear when your doorbell rings and you're not expecting anyone. The investigation has widened. FBI agents have been going door to door, asking neighbors if they had internet trouble that night because the camera was disabled. The Wi-Fi went down. They're wondering if the suspect used a jammer, something that kills the signal, something that blinds the house before you walk in. That's not a crime of opportunity. That's planning. That's someone who came prepared, and if he came prepared, if he knew how to knock out a camera, if he knew an 84-year-old woman lived alone, if he knew her routine, then he did his homework. And people who do homework don't usually stop after one project. The sheriff didn't give details. He can't. There's an active investigation. There are leads they're following quietly. There's evidence they're holding close. But when a man like that goes on national television and says, "Be careful, this person could absolutely do it again," you listen. You don't change the channel. You don't scroll past. You listen, because law enforcement almost never says that. They almost always say, "We have no reason to believe there is an ongoing threat." That's the line. That's the script. Sheriff Nanos threw out the script, and that's when the criticism started. Not of the investigation itself, but of the message, of the warning. A former FBI agent named Jason Pack heard what the sheriff said and raised an eyebrow. He's been where Nanos is. He knows the pressure. He knows the spotlight. But he also knows how words land. Pack said, once you put that out there, every person watching wants to know who's at risk and what they ought to do about it. If you can't answer those questions, you probably shouldn't lead with that statement. He's right. From a pure PR perspective, it's risky. You don't want to panic people. You don't want to create fear without giving them somewhere to put it. But here's the thing about Sheriff Nanos. He wasn't doing PR. He was doing honesty. And sometimes honesty is messy. Pack also defended him. He said that if the sheriff knows the motive but won't share it, there's a reason. You don't tip your hand. You don't let the suspect know what you know. So the public sits in the dark with just enough information to be worried, but not enough to understand why. That's where we are. Suspended. We know Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. We know she raised a family, that her daughter is a familiar face to millions of Americans who wake up to the morning news. We know Savannah has made tearful pleas, offering $1 million of her own money for information. We know the FBI has raised the reward too. We know thousands of tips have come in. We know a man in California was arrested for sending fake ransom notes. He was trying to profit off a family's pain. But he's not the kidnapper. Just a scavenger. We know a delivery driver was detained, questioned, released. Not a suspect. So who's left? Someone in the dark. Someone with a backpack. Someone whose face we cannot see. The sheriff said, "I think from day one we had some strong beliefs about what happened, and those beliefs haven't diminished. That means whatever they thought in the beginning, they still think now. The theory hasn't fallen apart. The evidence hasn't led them away from it. It's led them deeper into it. 40 days turned into 50. 50 into more. The seasons started to change in the desert. The nights got a little warmer. But one thing didn't change. Nancy Guthrie did not come home. The family still waits, still posts, still hopes. But hope gets heavier as the days stack up. It's harder to carry. Sheriff Nanos was asked if they think she's alive. He didn't answer directly. He said they're treating it as an active investigation, which is law enforcement language for we don't know. But when they talk about the DNA, when they talk about the timeline, when they talk about the suspect's potential to strike again, there's an undertone. At EEAVINESS. This is not a case that's going cold. It's a case that's waiting. Waiting for a break. Waiting for someone to talk. Waiting for a piece of evidence to match a name. The FBI has set up tents at the house. They've recreated the night. They've studied the angles. They've measured the suspect's height from the video. They've identified the backpack brand sold only at Walmart. They've asked every neighbor within 2 miles to hand over their own surveillance footage. They're building a net, slowly, carefully, but nets only work if something swims into them, and the sheriff's warning still echoes. The suspect could strike again. Not well, could. That one word leaves the door open. It leaves room for the worst. It leaves room for another family to wake up to a cold cup of tea and a dark house. Nancy Guthrie's children have done what children do. They've fought. They've begged. They've offered money. They've gone on television even when it hurt. Savannah stood in front of cameras and said, "She may be lost. She may already be gone." Those words took something out of her. You could hear it, but they haven't stopped. They won't stop because she's their mother. And you don't stop looking for your mother. The rest of us, we watch from a distance. We read the updates. We shake our heads. And maybe, if we're honest, we look at our own front doors a little differently. We check our own cameras. We wonder if the person who took Nancy could be near us. Could be anyone. Could be planning something right now. Sheriff Nana said it best. Criminal minds are criminal minds. They don't retire. They don't take breaks. They just wait for the next opportunity. The question no one can answer yet is simple. Is he still waiting? Or has he already moved on? This story isn't over. It won't be over until someone comes forward, until that DNA hits a match, until the man in the dark is pulled into the light. Until then, there's a family holding on to hope and a sheriff holding on to a warning. If you want to follow this case, if you want to stay updated on what happens next, subscribe to the channel. Not because I want the numbers, but because some stories matter. Some stories affect the way we see the world. Some stories remind us that safety is fragile, that evil is real, and that the only thing standing between a family and heartbreak is a good investigator and a community that pays attention. Drop a comment if you think they'll find him. Drop a comment if you live in a quiet neighborhood and this story made you look over your shoulder. I read them. I see you. And I'll be here when the next chapter unfolds. Until then, lock your doors. Check your cameras. And don't ignore the feeling that something's wrong. That feeling has saved lives before.